we're not doing the Torah portion because last week we did it twice. Double portion. Love. So today we're going to do Acts 12 and Acts 13. So let's do a quick recap. Who can do a recap for me? What happened previously in Acts, in the prequel? Some big moments in Acts. Hello? Humans? Interaction. Yeah, just the big moments that we've gone over. Some of the big things that we've discussed. Acts 1.
They received the Holy Spirit.
Well, we have the ascension in Acts 1.
Receiving of the Holy Spirit.
Acts 2. Yeah. Who was that to?
It was to the Jewish.
To the Jewish people, yes.
And later on to the Gentiles.
Yes, so we have Acts 1, verse 8, where Yeshua says, the Holy Spirit's going to come first to the Jews, then the Samaritans. Everyone always forgets the Samaritans. Then the Gentiles, and to the ends of the earth, is what he says. So in Acts 2, we see Holy Spirit on the Jewish people. Where? Most likely in the temple complex. Okay? In Acts 8, the Samaritans, who were the Samaritans? Half Jew. Why?
Because after
The Syrians.
the Syrians,
Yeah.
they scattered them,
Okay?
and they interbreeded with the Syrians and other people that they
Yes.
and so they had half Jewish. So they had some of the Torah, but it was very much.
Okay. And the Jews never really got on well with them. Okay, because of that, because they got confused, or Jews think they got confused. And that's why there was always strife between the two. And then, when did we see it pour out on Gentiles? Acts 10. Who was that? Just checking if your egg's been paying attention. Logan, who was it?
I don't know.
Starts with a C, ends with a Cornelius.
Oh, serious.
Cornelius. Okay, and remember, it was that strange vision that people always like to argue, no, but that means you can eat whatever you want. Acts 10, white sheet. 3 visions of the white sheet coming down with unclean animals. And how many men arrived at his door? 3 Gentiles, which they saw as unclean. Okay, and then we had Acts 11, which is very much narrative, and then Acts 12 again is pretty much narrative again. So let's get into it. If you want to open Bibles in Acts 12,
Can I read?
let's just say the blessing first. Man, just say the blessing. What's that do? Okay. Let's just say the blessing. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher noten haTorah. Amen. Praise the you, Adonai God, King of the universe, who gives the Torah of truth and the good news of salvation to his people Israel and to all the peoples through his son Yeshua the Messiah our Lord. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, peeps, we're going to go very quickly into talking about, so those with kids, please listen up. Okay, we're going to go very quickly into a festival that most people are celebrating this weekend. I'm going to be talking about it from a biblical point of view and from a historical point of view and where that came from. So, if you don't want your kids to be confused with what I'm saying, maybe when I give the nod, send the little ones to go play, because then you can hear what I have to say, and if it makes sense to you, if it hits home with you, then you can teach your house about that. Okay, I don't want to cause confusion in the house with the kids saying but. So let's just keep it like that, okay? So if you feel like you don't want to cause that confusion, or if you feel like it's going to cause confusion, I'm talking about Easter. Then let the kiddies go play. I'll teach you, and then we can take it from there. All right. So, Acts 12, verse 1. It was around this time that King Herod began arresting and persecuting certain members of the Messianic community. And he had James, John's brother, put to death by the sword. Oh, so we loaded already from the start. Which Herod? Okay. Remember we spoke about Herod. There's a lot of Herods in the Bible, right?
Yeah. I remember that.
First Herod that we speak of is Herod the Great. Why was he called Herod the Great, Jordan?
He was the first one.
It doesn't make him great.
And Moses was the
Doesn't make him great.
Isn't it something about his construction work?
Yes, very much about this construction work. Hold on. Yes?
Is this Herod Agrippa?
The one that we're talking about, yes, but I'm going through all the Herods at the moment. So I want
So
you
is
guys
this
to
the
get
one- is this
a
the
grip
one
up
that's-
on all the Herods.
Is this the one that wanted to kill Schönberg?
Herod the Great. Herod the Great, born 73 BC. What do we know about him? He was an Edomite.
Oh.
His dad was an Arab. Okay? His mom was a princess from Petra, which is now Jordan, modern day Jordan. His dad was very politically involved with Rome at the time, so much so that Herod the Great actually grew up under Roman influence. And during his teens, he was already being primed to become someone of power somewhere in the Roman Empire. That's what we know about Herod. Herod married. When you look into Herod's life, you know, a lot of people say he's a madman because he was, and he's a terrible guy because he was. But he did some pretty amazing things, and he was extremely dedicated and passionate about what he did. I'm not saying he's a good guy. The things that he did were terrible. But when you look at his life, I see a life of sadness, I see a life of depression. When he got put into power of the Judean territory, when he became king, according to Rome, of the Jews, he was never seen as the king. Why? Why would the Jewish people not recognize him as a king? I mean,
Because he's not really acting like
it wasn't. But remember, the Davidic dynasty states what? Who's the king?
God.
Okay, but the king has to come from the Davidic dynasty, right? There were a group of people called the Hasmoneans. Very, how can I say, religious, according to the Torah. Herod tried to wangle his way in and impress people by pretty much marrying someone called Mariamna. Mariamna, who was a Hasmonean princess. So he tried to marry his way into the lineage of the king rule, so that his kids would be legitimate. That's what he tried to do. From Herod and Mariamna, there were two kids, Aristobulus and Alexander. No, Alexander the Lesser. Okay. Because he could never be true king, that caused quite a bit of depression in his life. He was always trying. He was always trying to impress the people. So he thought, you know what? If I can't be king, I'm going to try and impress the socks off of everyone. And he did great building works. What are some of the amazing things he did?
He was able to make cement or brick settle underwater.
Yeah, so he actually used the Roman concept of volcanic ash, cement, that could be set underwater. And he created Caesarea, the port of Caesarea. There was pretty much nothing there at the time. He created this port that had 40 hectares of space, which is ridiculous. We don't actually see that feat done again in the Roman Empire. He was a true master builder in the Lego movie. That would be him. Okay? He did that because he wanted people, if you look at it, you have Caesarea over here. He built this port out here in Caesarea which landed up being a massive economical advantage for the whole of Israel at the time. A lot of money came from that port. Because the problem is in winter, the seas get very rough and there's nowhere to keep your ship. So he created this port so everyone could keep their ships over here. And obviously all his friends had access to that as well, because in Rome, whoever you are friends with meant everything. Herod the Great made a lot of bad choices with friends. A lot of his friends ended up being killed. He always seemed to choose the wrong side, but Herod always had this amazing way of coming back. And at one point, one of his friends was Mark Antony, and Mark Antony went against Octavian. He lost, he got killed. Herod was supposed to support Mark Antony when they came and they attacked him, but he didn't. He went to Octavian at the end and he said, you know what, Octavian, I was supposed to support Mark Antony, but I never. I was very, very loyal to him. And Octavian at the time was much younger than him. He said, okay, fine. And he ended up giving him more territory. But Herod's plan was he brought in 70 massive pieces of silver that were 30 kilograms, I think 30 kilograms each. And Octavian was in debt at the time. So Herod came and gave him all of this money, and Octavian was like, shut, okay, now you and me, we're friends. This is how he kept staying in power, okay? Another thing is, he was very paranoid. He suspected his wife, and this was one of many wives, he suspected his wife of cheating on him. He was so paranoid as well that every time he went out, he told his cronies to kill her if he doesn't come back alive. Later on, we actually see that he does execute her because he thought that she was cheating on him. It was just a thought. These two boykies, he suspected of them joining and becoming cahoots and trying to take over from him. So he strangled them.
What?
His own sons. Lovely guy. While all of this is happening and throughout his life, we see him building Caesarea. And I think that was more for him than for anything else. But in order to try and win over the Jews, to try and be that king that they want to see him as, that he wants them to see him as, he built the temple. That big white shiny temple that you see, that you think of when you think of the temple, Herod's temple. He built that. There's a lot that goes into building that temple. He spent a lot of time, he had to flatten a mountain, I'm not going to go into it. He literally built the temple for them. He was not allowed in there, but he built it for them. His son, before he killed him, they actually pushed his son into the priesthood. And he was not allowed to see his inauguration, he had to watch from the back. So all of this jealousy building up in his mind all the time. It's sort of made him a little bit mad. And then also at the same time, he built this temple. It was the biggest temple that they knew about. Massive. So much so that when you came in, you just see this white, it was marble. White marble from a distance with gold at the top.
What's wrong?
Marble is a shiny rock. Okay? White marble with gold at the top, incredibly beautiful. The Jewish sages didn't like Herod, but they had nice things to say about his temple. They loved the temple. They hated the man.
Weird.
Yeah. Also, at the same time, he built the cave of Machpelah. Who was buried there? It's the patriarchs and some of the matriarchs, right? Why would he do that? He's actually not Jewish. He's not full Jewish. But he's building massive structures for them. He builds it on top of the cave of Machpelah. Again, he wants to find favor with them. Then later on in his life, we see things falling apart. And he lived to be about 70, which is long for those days. So he must have been quite a strong man. Okay, and he went through quite a bit. Lived to be about 70, but in the end years of his life, he lost his mind a little bit. And some people today, if they look at the symptoms that he had, we're talking about really gross symptoms, He was itching all the time. It was driving him nuts. His skin was just inflamed, putrefaction of the lower area. I think he had gangrene there. Lovely. No, don't worry about it, Azana. And he was going nuts. And in the last span of his life, he killed more people than he had ever done. He was just ordering people to get executed all over the place. And he also put an order in, and he said, you know what? When I die, you take all the noble men of the Jews, and you take them to Jericho, and when I die, you kill them, so that there will be mourning when I'm dead. They won't cry for me, he knows that, but they'll cry for the Jewish noblemen. And he did die eventually. They didn't carry out that order, thank goodness. But yeah, it was a bit of a nutcase towards the end of his life, and pretty much most of the way through it. But you need to understand, he had a few more sons, and you need to understand why they were broken at the same time. Okay, so that's Herod the Great. He had Aristobulus, who he killed along with his wife, and Alexander, who he killed, and he had a couple of other sons. One of them was Archelaus. Okay, and we're going to go through who these people are very briefly, don't worry. I just wanted to really paint a picture of this guy because he sets the stage for pretty much all the other Herods that follow. If you have a crazy father, you're probably going to end up being crazy yourself unless you break that chain. Okay? Your upbringing kind of defines you quite a bit, but you can define who you are from when you're an adult. You know, they say that you only have the first 12 years with your kids. You set the foundation for the first 12 years. That's where you do your imprinting on them as much as possible. That's why we need to spend as much time with our kids in the first 12 years of their life as possible, teaching them the word, because that will be their foundation moving forward. I don't know what Herod's relationship was like with his kids, but if I base it on those two, I think the first 12 years of all of their lives must have been complete dread. Okay, so you had Archelaus, Herod Archelaus. He was a son. You had Antipas, Herod Antipas. We had Aristobulus. We had Alexander. We have Philip, Herod Philip, and then we have under Aristobulus, before he was killed, he had sons, and that's Agrippa, number one, and he had a son, Agrippa, number two. Archelaus, he was in charge of the heartland. So if you look at Israel as a whole, he was in charge of the heartland. He was the one that Joseph feared may have his son killed. That's why they went to Egypt. In that story, when Joseph went down to Egypt to fulfill the prophecy of Yeshua coming out of Egypt. That's that. Herod. Okay? Herod Antipas, he's the one that had John killed.
John the Baptist.
Yes. The John head off in the beginning of Luke.
Hey, that's my name.
Johnny, yes, don't worry. There's no more Herod. Okay, he's gone. Okay, that's that one. And that's the one that Yeshua called the fox. You sly fox, tell that sly fox, which is pretty much a Hebraic idiom for you stupid person. Okay, this is this Herod. Philip, can you tell me who that is? We've been to a place. It was, yes, very much a Roman place.
The one with the statues,
Where?
the artwork.
Where?
It was
Caesarea.
there by the theatre place. Where we walked in
Up
and
north.
there was those little, like, I don't know what to call it.
Look back. Panias.
Yeah,
Panias. Okay, but anyway, he controlled the upper sort of territory. Herod Philip is the guy in Luke 3, which he built Caesarea Philippi, which was up north. If you ever go to Israel, I'll take you there. And he was responsible for pretty much the northern Galilee and up. Okay, that's the only time we sort of see mention of him there in Luke 3. Agrippa, on the other hand, he's the guy that, as he pointed out, this is who we're talking about now in Acts 12. This is the Agrippa we're talking about. Agrippa number 2, we see much later on in Acts 25. We will get to him at some point in our lives when we finish the book of Acts. Okay, and that's the one that Paul almost convinced to become a believer. Remember, he said, you almost convinced me. Yeah?
I've just got a question. What's the difference between the Herods and the Roman government? So
They were part of the Roman government.
So Herod is the controls the Roman government.
Herod was put into power of Judea by Rome. And so were all of these in certain areas. There's just trying to think. There's this. No, I won't go into that. It's just kind of confusing. All right. So when you're reading Acts 12, I know you're not going to have all of this in the back of your mind, but you've got to understand who this man is, who this Agrippa is. His father was killed by Herod the Great, which was his grandfather. Okay, these Herods weren't nice people. I can tell you that now. They weren't the nicest of people. They were megalomaniacs. They were power hungry. They killed a lot of people just because they could. This one over here, King Herod, began arresting and persecuting certain members of the Messianic community, and he had James, John's brother, put to death by the sword. Why? Why would he do that? When you read these stories, you've got to ask yourself these questions. Why would he kill James?
Is this the first disciple that was killed?
Well, of Yeshua. See? Yeah, ends up.
He did it because he saw that it pleased the Jews.
Yeah, it tells us that, right? Read a little bit further, it says he actually sees that it pleased the Jews. So when he did that, he went to go arrest Peter. But why? Why is he doing all of this? Remember, we had Paul standing while who was getting stoned? Stephen. Stephen was getting stoned, and he approved of his murder. Why? Because now there's like a split happening in Israel. You have the people that are believing in Yeshua, and you have the Jews that are like, not happening. And then we had the whole story of Paul. Paul went to where? Damascus, and he met a traveler, Yeshua. He met Yeshua on the way, and he changed. And then the Sanhedrin was like, what is actually going on here? They were confused. But because of all of that, the gospel spread. Mostly north, some south, east. Okay? This is why he's again, like his granddaddy before him, he's trying to find favor with the people. He's trying to impress the Jews. Because the Jews have this nasty way of coming together and causing a riot and making trouble for everyone. Which is why he didn't do it on the day of Matzah, the first day. During Passover, there's no capital punishment allowed. We're going to talk about that now with Peter. But the point is, he's doing all of this. He found James, he killed James, he saw that it pleased the people, and then now we actually see him going for Peter as well. Okay? When Herod saw how much this pleased the Judeans, he went on to arrest Peter as well. It was during the days of Matzah. So when Herod seized him, he threw him in prison, handing him over to be guarded by 4 squads of 4 soldiers each, with the intention of bringing him to public trial after Pesach. Because again, Passover, because there's no capital punishment during Passover. That's one of the Judeans' laws at the time, right? No capital punishment, please. So he doesn't want to upset the people. If he kills Peter now, he's going to have a riot on his hands. They're not going to go completely against him. He wants more favor from them. He wants to kill him later. And he knows if he kills him later, he's probably going to squash the way that's moving out. If he takes out Peter and he takes out James, he probably had his eyes set on all the other disciples as well. Yes?
And so did he order the stoning of Stephen?
Hmm?
Did he order?
Who?
This is Agrippa 1.
Agrippa 1. Stoning of Stephen was the Sanhedrin.
I guess it wasn't him.
No.
Okay, so did he order Peter and James?
He ordered James to be killed. Listen, it was around that time King Herod began arresting and persecuting certain members of the Messianic community and had James put to the sword. Killed James. Then he arrested Peter. But before we get there, let's not get, we're going to do the Easter thing after, okay? Peter gets arrested. Most scholars believe that when Peter was arrested, he was put into the Antonian fortress. But what we see here is 4 squads of soldiers, of 4 soldiers each. Why so many guards? Why does he need so many soldiers to look to watch him?
To make sure he doesn't get away.
Right? Because it's happened before, right? In Acts 5, we see him out of prison. Yeah?
We also see that everyone's trying to kill him. That's also plays with
No, he only wanted to kill him. Herod wanted to kill him.
Yeah, but we only see something similar with Paul as well.
Is it to
No. What happened in Acts 5? Some other people get thrown into jail, and then we see them out of jail preaching in the temple square.
And then he gets thrown back into jail.
This is in his area. He would have known about this. He's like, this ain't happening on my watch again. I'm going to give you 4 squadrons of soldiers, which means there's one squadron for each watch of the night. There's 4 watches of the night. He's going to have 4, so kiddies. We're sitting in the jail cell over here. This is the bars. Okay. This is Peter. He's got the shekel to another guard over here, and a shekel to another guard over here. And outside, there's another 2. He's not going anywhere. Okay?
Sure.
But what I find funny is, listen to this. So when Herod seized him, he threw him in prison, handing him over to be guarded by 4 squads of 4 soldiers each, with the intention of bringing him to public trial after Pesach. So Peter was being held under watch in prison, but intense prayer was being made to God on his behalf by the Messianic community. The night before Herod was going to bring him to trial, Peter was sleeping between 2 soldiers.
Yeah.
He's shackled to two soldiers. It's like sleeping. Peter doesn't have an issue with sleeping. He really doesn't. Okay? This guy sleeps through everything. He's going to get killed the next day sleeping. Would you be sleeping if you knew you were going to get next day?
No.
No. Would you be? Okay, first of all, I sleep in a very peculiar way. So I sleep like this. If I can't sleep like that, I get very grumpy, and I must have my hand on a pillow, and I must have 2 pillows over there, and if it's not 2 pillows, I'm grumpy. That's why I'm grumpy the first few days in Israel. Because I don't have 17 pillows that I need to sleep. Okay? Peter, on the other hand, is shackled. He's shackled to 2 guards. Probably it doesn't matter. But how do you move when you're shackled to 2 guards? This oak's passed out. Okay? Which amazes me, because if you look at it, the Mount of Transfiguration, right? He was one of the guys there. He was sleeping. And then the whole Mount of Transfiguration happened, and he was like, I'll make 3 Sukkots, let's do this. He was passed out.
But maybe you're sleeping because he had peace in Abba.
We're going to get
He's
to it.
like, sure.
We're going to get to this. The Garden of Gethsemane, when Yeshua was praying, and he said, guys, please pray with me. 3 times Peter was sleeping. He comes back to Peter and he's like, you can't even stay awake. Peter's like, and then Yeshua goes and prays again and Peter's out. And now, in prison, he's being told he's about to die. The next day, he's going to die. Why is he not stressing? Yeshua made a promise to Peter. If you go with me to John 21. John 21, verse 18. Listen to this, guys. So Peter, I can just imagine Peter going there. He's like, put me in prison again, you bloody nincompoops. You don't know what's going to happen. I know what Yeshua told me. Don't worry, I'm going to sleep now. Goodbye. Because listen to this. Verse 18. John 21, verse 18. It says here, where's that verse? Yes, indeed, I tell you, when you were younger, you put on your clothes and went where you wanted. This is Yeshua talking to Peter. But when you grow old, you will stretch out your hands and someone else will dress you and carry you where you do not want to go. He said this to indicate the kind of death by which Peter would bring glory to God. And Yeshua said to him, Lecha chorai, follow me. Yeshua promised him he's going to live to an old age. And he's just telling in prison, he's like, oh no, something's going to happen. Don't worry. Yokes can't keep me under lock and key.
Wasn't he crucified upside down?
Eventually.
So he was fairly old when that happened already.
We don't know. That's all traditional. It's not mentioned in here. But yes, those oaks faced horrible deaths. Nearly all of them except for John. Okay? And he did it upside down. Why did he do it upside down?
And because Yeshua was up straight, he didn't want to be up straight like Yeshua.
Upside down, you actually die quicker. Is it longer? Much longer. Oh yeah, because you can't actually suffocate. Your lungs don't fill up and you don't drown in your own fluid. Yes? It's a long story, I'm not a doctor. I'll tell you next time.
But why don't you get killed if all the blood rushes to your head?
Eventually,
No, you'll just have a very big headache.
the way Yeshua is crucified, you're hanging like that, you suffocate, because everything goes,
Maybe so.
so you die quicker.
So guys, so we have Peter here sleeping. He's pretty chilled, and we have the Messianic community here, the believers praying. It says here, but intense prayer was being made to God on his behalf by the Messianic community. I'm pretty sure there would have been intense prayer for James as well, but James didn't make it. Why? James doesn't make it, but Peter makes it.
Only Abba knows.
Right.
Abba. Romans 8 verse 28.
Your favorite verse.
That's my favorite verse.
The point is, it doesn't matter. This life on earth is temporary. You can see it as the fact that James beat him. James beat him. He died first. He made it there first. Peter still had a long way to go and a lot of more work to do. Okay? That the Father's will be done. We don't know what the Father's will is. We don't know how long we have. We really don't. We need to bless God for every day that we have. Peter, on the other hand, knew he's going to live a little bit longer, which is why he doesn't really care what's happening to him right now. Okay?
That's amazing. That's
These guys had faith. I mean, if you look at Paul, he got flogged how many times? He got shipwrecked how many times? Got bitten by a snake, he still doesn't die.
Wasn't
Like
that Paul?
man of steel, Iron Man.
Wasn't that Paul that got bitten by a
That's what I'm
snake?
saying.
I thought you said Peter.
Guys, the point is we don't know when we're going to go, okay? Peter, on the other hand, he knew. Yeshua promised him at that point, after he had this long conversation of, do you love me, do you love me, do you love me? Peter didn't get it. He got it later on, I promise. Okay? So the point is, the actual point of the constant prayer, why? You know, we can pray to God. That's a gift to us. Okay, we see this happening a lot. When Paul was persecuting the first believers, remember we spoke about that. He made himself a target for the early believers. Intense prayer was happening, and look what happened to Paul. He's on his way to Damascus to sort out them bloody believers, and he becomes one of the strongest believers. Intense prayer can change an outcome, but we need to humble ourselves before God. That's why they were doing it. Prayer and fasting can do wonderful things. If we acknowledge that we are but nothing on this earth, and we appeal to God and try to get as close as we can to Him, that's what matters. Okay? We can't just sit back and say, well, I wonder what's going to happen to him. Shame. We need to do our part as well. We need to communicate with God. Okay? We should be praying all the time. We should be giving thanks to God all the time. You know, the sages say that, you should at least thank God 100 times a day. Find reasons to thank God. Anything. When you wake up in the morning, thank you, Abba, I have another day here. Thank you that I can make a mark on this earth another day. Thank you that I have kids. Thank you that I can teach them your word. Thank you that I'm healthy. Thank you that I have clothes. As Richard says, if you have one set of clothes, you're considered sorted. If you have more than that, you're wealthy.
So we're all millionaires,
Yeah,
according to that teaching.
exactly. And according to our families, we are super wealthy. Just the fact that we have family. We forget where we are in this world. We forget what we have. We take things for granted. But we've got to be about God's business every day. And some days you're going to have bad days, and some days you're going to have good days. But the point is, we need to be in constant prayer, like the early believers were. They got together and they were in constant prayer. And look what happened the first time, Acts 2. They were all in one mind, together, praying. And we see the Holy Spirit come down.
Mind.
All in one mind.
The other says that we're in the word, pray constantly, pray without ceasing, pray continually. Remind us all that.
That's what we need to do. Okay? If you find yourself talking to God more and more often, that's a good thing. So, and we're going to get to the Passover Easter thing now. Okay? Let's just carry on reading a little bit. Let's try to do 12. Yeah, and this is a funny part. There's humor in the Bible, and I read it, and sometimes I laugh. One of my favorite parts is Elisha with his soup, where these guys make Bezos are funny in a weird sort of way, but these guys, these priests, I think they made the soup, or he made the soup for them, and they taste the soup, and they're like, "Man of God, there's death in the soup." That was me. I was finished for about 10 minutes. I was rolling on the floor laughing. And he goes and he finds wild pumpkin, and he comes back with his wild pumpkin. I can just imagine Elisha and Elijah were probably really funny-looking people, wild. Okay, I mean they had bears as pets, right? And he comes in with his pumpkin, and he throws a wild pumpkin in, and then all of a sudden it's lovely. Apparently, the sages see that as one of his miracles.
Wow.
I'm going to make this soup taste lovely. But again, there's humor in the Bible if you see it, if you're up for it. But let's start at verse 6 here. The night before Herod was going to bring him to trial, Peter was sleeping between two soldiers. He was bound with two chains, one on each side, and guards were at the door, keeping watch over the prison. Suddenly, an angel of God stood there, and a light shone in the cell. So he's sleeping, and all of a sudden, an angel comes down. Light everywhere, and he's still sleeping. Transfiguration, right? Same thing. Light everywhere. Peter's still sleeping. Listen to what it says. He tapped Peter's side and woke him. Literally, the angel had to go, "Peter, wake up." I laugh. He says, "Hurry." And this is the angel talking to Peter. "Hurry, get up." I mean, the angel must be thinking, what the heck he's got that? "Hurry, get up," he said, and the chains fell off his hands. The angel said to him, "Put on your clothes and sandals." And he did. "Throw on your robe," he said, "and follow me." Going out, Peter followed him, but did not realize that what was happening through the angel was real. He thought he was seeing a vision, so he thought he was dreaming.
So Peter didn't have his clothes on.
No, he would have had something on.
We had something.
Okay, he's put his robe on and his sandals. Okay, but the point is, I find it fascinating. The angel comes down, Peter's fast asleep. The sun, the last time we saw this, people go blind. But slaps Peter in the side, is like, "Hey, get up." And Peter's like, "Oh." And then the chains fall off his hand, and then the angel still says to him, "Get dressed. Let's go." And I find that fascinating because God can do the extraordinary. Chains fell off his hand, but he still expected him to get dressed by himself. It's like, you know what, I'm going to do stuff for you, but you kind of still need to do stuff for yourself before we can move mountains together. I think it's fascinating. And then he says to him, "Put on your clothes and your sandals," and he did. "Throw on your robe." I don't know, maybe he wasn't wearing anything. "And follow me." Going out, Peter followed him, but did not realize what was happening. Through the angel was real. He thought he was seeing a vision. Having passed the first guard and a second, they arrived at the iron gate leading to the city. This opened to them by itself. Again, angel's just like, open. The gate opens up. and they go through electronic gate. And they made their exit. They went down the length of one street, and suddenly the angel left him. Then Peter came to himself and said, "Now I know for sure that the Lord sent his angel to rescue me from Herod's power and from everything the Judean people were hoping for." He's standing in the middle of nowhere and he's making the statement. He's obviously woken up now. He's like, right, I knew this was going to happen. I knew it. Yeshua promised me I'm going to live old. These oaks passed out. He's outside of the city, but
Those guys were probably going to be killed.
they are killed.
Oh,
They are killed. We'll get to that. But you have this imagery, and the angel comes down. Light, hurry up, Peter, get out. Put on your sandals, put on your robe, make haste. What does that remind you of?
For Egypt.
Yes, Passover. The people were standing, cloak girded, sandals on their feet, staff in hand, ready to run. Peter, and it's at the time of Passover. If you look at it, it's at that time, the days of Matzah. The angel was speaking the language that he would have understood. Hurry up, I'm going to pull you out of your bondage. But you need to do something as well. You need to get ready. I'll do the miraculous stuff, and you've seen this happen before. Remember the Exodus? I'll do the miraculous stuff. I just need you to walk and move. Please, let's go. So guys, again, God can do miraculous stuff in your life, but you kind of need to take a step as well. You can't sit back and say, Abba, please move the mountain for me, and do nothing. You can't expect to find, I don't know, let's talk about
Find a job then.
Find a job.
find a job, right?
Watch TV with that.
Yeah, Abba, please open the doors for me, and then like Richard says, you just sit at home and you watch TV all day, but you don't actually send your CV out. There comes a point where we need to take 2 steps. God will take 8 steps for us. Okay, if it is His will, those doors will be opened. If it was God's will, this door was opened. And it was God's will at that time. And so it was a massive gate that they had to go through, miraculously opened. God can do miraculous things for you. You need to put the effort in as well. Just remember that. It's not going to be handed to you on a silver platter, I promise you. We need to work hard. Yes.
Out of experience, I think it's got to do with almost like giving permission, because we have will.
Because we have
Will.
free will. Yeah.
Will. So it's giving permission as well.
Yes.
And it's literally just starting to take that first step here and finish take the first step and then,
Yeah.
put us in there. Doing the spiritual deliverances and everything.
The story paints us a few pictures. God's timing is sometimes very last minute.
It
Right?
doesn't move quickly, but it does move slowly.
He will move when the time is right. He moved when the time is right. The next day, Peter was going to be killed. Okay, it was crunch time. We're talking like last minute time here. Okay? And that's the faith we need to have. If God has promised you something, have faith to know that it will come true. Peter was promised something, he had faith to know that it would come true in the nick of time. I got it now. It took a while. But we need to allow God's timing to play out. Sometimes we are very, very impatient. I want that job now. I want that car now. I want that thing now. I want my sweetie now.
I want to go to Israel now.
I want to go to Israel now. Yeah. Sometimes we want what we want, but it's not what we need. God knows what we need. Okay? Peter didn't want to be in that jail cell, I promise you that. But he needed to be there so that that story could be told later on so that we can be discussing it and other people can be discussing it. And people can see. Even when he goes to the other believers now, when you see them, they're like, what? We weren't expecting this. Let's read, and I'll show you. Realizing what had happened, we had verse 12. He went to the house of Miriam, the mother of Yochanan, surnamed Mark, John Mark, where many people had gathered to pray. He knocked at the outside door, and a servant named Rhoda came to answer. So the door's not open yet, just keep that in mind. Rhoda's like, who's there? She's like, it's me, Peter. Peter. She recognized Peter's voice and was so happy that she ran back in without opening the door. Again, humor, right? You can see this. Now Peter's like, oh my word, they're going to come get me at any moment. Rhoda's like, oh my word, it's Peter. She runs. Apparently she was a teenager. She runs in and she tells everyone else. Peter's still standing outside. And when she came, she ran back in without opening the door and announced that Peter was standing outside. You're out of your mind, they said to her. But she insisted it was true. So they said, it is his angel. Meanwhile, Peter kept knocking. And when they opened the door and saw him, they were amazed. So they're busy discussing theology. Oh, it was his angel. It can't be him. Rhoda's like, he's there. I heard him. He's there. No, man, it must be his guardian angel. Don't worry about it. They're discussing theology and he's standing outside and he wants to come in. Meanwhile, Peter kept knocking, and when they opened their door, they saw him and they were amazed. Motioning to them with his hand to be quiet. He's like, shut up. Don't say anything. He told them how the Lord had brought him out of prison and said, tell all this to James and his brothers. Then he left and went elsewhere. When daylight came, there was no small commotion. That's again, interesting choice of words. There was a lot of commotion happening. Okay. When Herod realized that this guy's missing, but the 4 guards are still there. There was no small commotion among the soldiers over what had become of Peter. Herod had a thorough search made for him, but they failed to find him. So he cross-examined the guards and ordered them put to death. Man putting man to death. Okay, where was it? Where am I now? And so the Lord search for him. Okay. Then Herod went down from Judah to Caesarea and spent time there. Okay. Herod went down from Judah to Caesarea and spent time there. Why? Okay, and this I went into this, and this is actually quite interesting. Let's just read the whole story and then I'll come back to it, because it falls in line here with verse 20. Now Herod was very angry with the people of Tyre and Sidon, so they joined together and sought an audience with him. That's a weird thing to put in the middle of the story, don't you think? Who are these people? Who's Tyre and Sidon? Up north. Okay, coastal cities up north. After securing the support of Blastus, the king's small assistant, they asked for peace because they depended on the king's land for their food supply. Didn't we just have a conversation about Agav in Acts 11? The guy who was called Locust? What did he predict? Yeah, it was a weird name. What did he predict? The famine, right? And it came true. It was the years of scarcity, as it's put in the Talmud. There was hardly any food. Why? Because the Nile flooded its banks so severely that it destroyed all the crops, rotted all the crops from the wetness. Greece, they also had floods which rotted their crops. And Israel was in the year of 7th year, right? The sabbatical year. No harvesting taking place. There was hardly any food. So it turns out that Agrippa at this time levied an embargo, which means no trading, okay, on Tyre and Sidon. Most likely because of the famine. And he's like, whatever food we got, we're going to keep. What's happening? We're having mass exodus. All right, maybe now's a good time to talk about Easter. Very good. Johnny. Okay, I'll finish this off and we'll go into Easter.
You're the boss. Give me money to come in for you.
Okay. Cool. Let me just finish this thought and then we can go on to it, okay? But so we actually start seeing the famine start playing out now. So Agrippa decided to put an embargo on Tyre and Sidon because he's obviously trying to keep what food he has, okay? They then sent people down to Caesarea to speak to Blastus. Blastus was Agrippa's personal secretary, okay? To seek an audience with Agrippa to try and make things right. This is what's happening at the time. At the same time, why Caesarea? we have, what's his name? Claudius, Emperor Claudius. On that day, well, he was coming back from Britain after a 6-month absence. So they were hosting festivities for the emperor in Rome. So what they do is, okay, let's go in all the little Romes around the Roman Empire, we're going to host festivities as well, which was Caesarea at this time. That's why they're in Caesarea. That's why Herod went to Caesarea. That was the little Rome of Judea. Okay, so they're all there. These people from Tyre and Sidon come in, they sit in the stands, and we have this weird thing happening here. Listen to this. It says here, verse 21, a day was set to host this festivity, and Herod in his royal robes sat on the throne and made a speech to them. The mob cried out, "This is the voice of a god, not a man." At once, because Herod did not give the glory to God, an angel of God struck him down. He was eaten away by worms and died. Lovely story. I want to read something from Josephus. Josephus, the historian, Jewish historian that was a historian for Rome, he wrote about this event. He said, yeah, Agrippa came to Caesarea where there was a festival for him. On the second day, he put on a garment made entirely of silver and came into the theater early in the morning, at which time the silver of his garment, reflecting the sun's rays, shone so resplendently as to spread a horror on those gazing at him. So he was like shining like crazy. Okay, that's basically what he's saying. Presently, his flatterers exclaimed that he was a god. Most likely these people from Tyre and Sidon. Okay, because now they're trying to find favor with him again. We need the food. So let's say nice things to Agrippa, and hopefully he will release the food to us. So they're shouting out. I mean, there's 4,500 people at this theater. And they're shouting out. You'll see now. Presently, his flatterers exclaimed that he was a god, adding, "Be merciful to us, for although till now we have reverenced only as a man, henceforth we will regard you as superior to mortal nature." But the king neither rebuked them nor rejected the impious flattery. However, as he looked up, he saw an owl. An owl. And immediately understood that this bird was the messenger of ill tidings. Suddenly and violently a severe pain arose in his stomach. Therefore he looked at his friends and said, "I, whom you call a god, am commanded now to leave this life, while Providence thus reproves the lying words you just now said to me." After 5 days, exhausted by the stomach pain, he died aged 53. Now, okay, the owl. I looked into this. This is incredibly interesting. 8 years prior, we have Agrippa owing the Rome treasury massive amounts of money. Okay, Agrippa had issues with money. He owed the treasury copious amounts of money, and he had to appear before Caesar and pay back the money, but he couldn't. So he went to his mother's friend, who was called Antonia, and lent money, got money from her. And he managed to actually pay that back. But at the same time, he made friends with someone called Gaius Caligula. Okay? Him and Caligula became good friends because Agrippa really spent all of his money on giving gifts to Caligula, because he thought, like his granddad, making friends with the wrong people. He thought that if I give him gifts, things are going to go well with me. Okay? Because when he comes into power, I will come into more power and things will be good for me. This is how the Roman people worked. Eh? You made friends, you made allies, and you hope that they become emperor, and then you become famous, basically. So, Agrippa bestowed generous gifts that nearly bankrupted him again. And Tiberius, who was the emperor at the time, Caligula was his adopted grandson. And in Rome, when you adopt someone, you're basically saying, that's the best of the best. I want this person in my family. Okay, we're not going to get into that now, but that's how it worked. Okay, so he adopted Caligula, and Tiberius is watching all of this at the same time. He was not happy about it. And again, one day while Agrippa and Caligula were riding in a chariot somewhere, Agrippa had his slave with him, and Agrippa said to Caligula, he said, "You know what? That other son of Tiberius, one day you're going to take him down, and you're going to be the emperor. And you and I, we're going to be cool buddies." Paraphrasing. Okay. The slave obviously heard all of this. Later on, Agrippa thinks that his slave was stealing from him, sends him to jail. His slave ratted him out to Tiberius. He said, "I need to speak to Tiberius." So his slave goes to Tiberius and tells him everything that Agrippa had said. At that point, Tiberius arrests Agrippa, puts him outside of his palace. Agrippa was sitting in chains, and above him was an owl. And there was a soldier, a German soldier with him. And it was actually one of the German barbarians that they came in and they civilized to become one of their soldiers. And the German soldier looked up at the owl and looked at him, and he said to him, just remember this, when you see this bird again, you will live only 5 days longer. The same God who brought this bird here as a sign to you will bring this to pass. God was speaking through that oak. And now we have Agrippa coming out in splendor with all his silver garments. Someone saying he's a God, and him not rebuking it. And then all of a sudden this owl appears. Owls don't appear in the day. This is in the morning. There's an owl there, and that's when he remembered. And as soon as he saw that, that's why this is Inya. As soon as he saw that owl, he was like, oh my goodness. I remember what had happened 8 years ago. And it turns out what had happened was Agrippa had severe stomach pain. And in 5 days he did die. But it turned out it was most likely a tapeworm that had created a cyst on his lobe of his liver that had burst. And apparently now modern medicine knows that when that thing bursts, it can cause instant death, but it's severely painful. And that's what happened to Agrippa. So that's why it says here, he was eaten away by worms and died. He dead. Okay. But the word of the Lord went on growing and being multiplied. Barnabas and Shaul, having completed their errand, returned from Jerusalem, bringing with them Yochanan, surnamed Mark. So there's a lesson in this. The point is, Agrippa was called a god, and he said nothing. He didn't rebuke them or correct them, and he didn't really accept it. He just sort of was like, meh. You know, when people pay us compliments and they admire us for what we've done, the first thing we should say to them is, thanks be to Abba.
Amen.
Because he put me in this position, and he allowed me to have that, and he allowed me to do this, and he put me on the right path. And you praise him and you give him all the glory. Otherwise, you might see an owl. Okay, that's quite scary. So, while on that point, let's have this chat about Easter, shall we? I'm going to ask the blanket question here. Okay, and I want to do this as sensitively as possible. Okay, because I had to find out about this a while ago, and you know, for me, Easter and Christmas and all these things were wonderful things in my life because that's just how I grew up. Okay. Where is Easter in the Bible? Okay, but there is one translation that says Easter, and it actually says it in Acts 12. Modern translations now have corrected that error, but we see that Easter was there. One of the translators actually translated as Easter. So where does Easter come from?
The pagan Ishtar.
Possibly yes. We celebrate Easter in remembrance of what?
Jesus cross.
Right.
Jesus is
But how did we get to calling it Easter? When in
That
every...
reminds me of Constantine, man.
Right,
Isn't it?
okay. Yeah, you're on the right path. You're on the right path. And that's why I didn't want the kids here, because I think they get heavily confused. But Uncle Nick says you must celebrate Easter. I want you guys to look into that yourself. Okay, I need you guys to do some research. I'm going to give you what I've found. Okay, and wherever it is, so somewhere. But the point is that Easter was actually Passover. So what I found, okay, and if we look at Passover, what are the instructions for Passover? Yes.
Well, we'll get the lamb on the certain time, slaughter the lamb.
Yeah, so if you've been joining us on Saturdays, we've spent a lot of time doing Passover. Sure, 5 lessons of Passover, I think about 8 hours of studying Passover. There are recordings on it. If you have the time, go through it, watch it double speed. But what we see is the lamb selected on the 10th day of Nisan, the first month. Okay, Nisan, I don't like saying Nisan, that's a Babylonian name. Those names of the months came from Babylon. Much like what we're going to discuss here, most likely comes from Babylon as well. Okay, the point is that in the days of Yeshua, they weren't celebrating Easter. They were celebrating Passover
Yes.
in remembrance now of Yeshua.
Yes.
Because that's what he said, right? He celebrated Passover with them. His disciples said, where shall we set out your Seder, your Passover Seder? Where shall we prepare your Seder? Yeshua celebrated Passover. And he said, do this in remembrance of me. So the Passover celebration, as Jewish as it may be to you, okay, it was very Jewish to me in the beginning. I was Jewish day. That's weird. Because I was brought up like that, to think that it's weird. Because I was brought up to think that Easter is how we celebrate Easter. And I'm not saying the Easter eggs are evil or anything like that. I'm saying it's linked to stuff, and we're going to get to that. Okay, but in my heart, if I want to celebrate time with God, I want to do it right. And I want to look at what he says about celebrating time with him. Yes, we want to do it right. Okay? Where do we see God's appointed times? Where do we get that in the Bible? It's a chapter, Leviticus 23. And it tells you how to spend time with him. That's how he wants to spend time with us. So again, where does Easter come from? And if you dig, and I promise you, you won't have to dig very hard to get this information. Okay? But basically, we had this sort of split. When the good news got to sort of the Gentiles sort of just ran with it. They didn't really have the Torah sort of upbringing or the education of the Torah, and they sort of assimilated things into their understanding. And this is where we have this sort of misunderstanding happening. And it happened for a long time, guys. I'm talking from mid-2nd century, so around 150 AD. Okay, we have the church developed two different practices for keeping Passover. The church, okay? In Rome, the date of Passover was moved from the 14th day of the first month, which is biblical, to the Sunday that followed it. And those believers in Rome no longer kept the Passover Seder meal, okay? Or the 7 days of unleavened bread. Instead, they fasted from the 14th of the month until Sunday, or just from Friday until Sunday. That's how they had adopted it. In the East, on the other hand, the churches continue to celebrate Passover in the manner that Torah stipulates. And we're talking about Paul, with John in Asia Minor, Syria, and the land of Israel. Those guys all kept it according to what Torah said. So much so that the Roman people actually started calling them quartodecimans, the 14ers. They keep it on the 14th day, they must be 14ers. They gave them a name. And this is sort of the argument that ensued from that time. And it lasted up till 325 CE. From about 150 to 325, we have the split happening. And Constantine coming at the Council of Nicaea. If you want to Google that, you can watch lots of videos about the Council of Nicaea and what they actually changed. And the general understanding, and I'm going to keep it quite short, is that the church wanted nothing to do with the Jewish people or how they celebrated anything because of the fact that they killed the Messiah. They were very upset with the Jews. That's where all anti-Semitism came from. And we sort of reinstated that time and time again with the Crusades and Hitler and all of these funny things. Every time a Jewish person sees a cross, they cringe. Because we did that. That's just how it is. When we came with the Crusades, we had lots of crosses on these big shields and we'd kill everyone we found. Okay? But the point is, the Council of Nicaea, listen to what Constantine says, and this is documented. The commemoration of the most sacred Passover feast being then debated for the last 100 and something years, it was unanimously decided that it would be well that it should be everywhere celebrated upon the same day. This is the Roman emperor at the time. It was, in the first place, declared improper to follow the custom of the Jews in the celebration of this holy festival, because their hands having been stained with the crime, their minds of these wretched men are necessarily blinded. Let us then have nothing in common with the Jews, who are our adversaries. That's what Constantine said. So they wanted nothing to do with how the Jews celebrated Passover, which is how Yeshua celebrated Passover. Resurrection Sunday became that thing at that point. But it was not called Easter until the 8th century. So how the heck did we get to that point? So I did a bit of digging again. There's a couple of theories on this. And you kind of have to ask yourself, where do these eggs come from? Where do the bunnies come from? I don't see it here. I don't see, thou shall celebrate Passover with thy bunny in hand, staff girded. I don't see that. You have to ask these questions. Why are we doing Easter's bunnies and eggs? So you got to kind of dig a little bit. And when you dig, it takes you right back to Babylon. Okay? Remember, the Jewish people were in Babylon for a while. Huh? They learned some weird stuff there. So much so that even in Jeremiah, there's talk of Babylonian stuff being filtered in. Okay? And in Ezekiel. But there was a goddess of fertility called Ishtar. Okay? Ishtar. Which they worshipped in the springtime. And how did they worship? Pate, adults only. Okay? And what they would do is they would have the rabbit and the egg, which were symbols of fertility. Rabbits, they make lots of other rabbits very quickly.
Yes.
Okay, and the egg, obviously, symbol of fertility, right? And rabbits, they go crazy. Okay, that's how they worshipped in Babylon, and that carried through for many years after that. And we even see the woman, I think it's in Ezekiel, where God says, I see the woman crying for Tammuz. Tammuz was one of the Babylonian gods. Ishtar's son. So we have this weird stuff happening. But then later on, and what happened there is that understanding went on to Medo-Persia, went on to the Greeks, and the Greeks actually called Ishtar Venus. And then it went on to the Romans. Before you know it, these people are celebrating the stuff, but they're saying, okay, you know what, Yeshua was resurrected on this day. Why don't we just kind of link the two together? That's the general understanding here. And I think that it sort of stemmed from this German month called Eoster. Where's it here? Eoster was an ancient German deity as well that they worshipped during that month. And in Anglo-Saxon circles, so sort of Western circles, the name for April was also Eoster. So we have this, what they believe is that the name could have been transferred to Resurrection Sunday after the Christianization of those people. They're like, oh, well, we're worshipping that on that day anyway. Let's just make it about Yeshua now. This is where it gets a bit gray, but you've got to ask yourself, okay, where do the bunnies come from? Where the heck do the eggs come from? And is Resurrection Sunday actually right? This year, yes. Okay? Most years, it's all over the place. And we got to go by the lunar cycle, which God installed. The lunar cycle is on the 10th day you select the lamb. That's when Yeshua came in on the Mount of Olives. They tested him according to the Torah in the temple. Okay, they found no fault with him. God said, make sure that lamb is spotless. The 14th day you sacrifice that lamb. That's when Yeshua was sacrificed. 3 nights later, it was resurrection. These days go according to the lunar cycle. So if we're going to celebrate something, and this is my heart, if I'm going to celebrate something, I want to make it in line with what God wants from us. It's not a Jewish thing. It's a God's people thing. If we align ourselves with God, and we are true God-fearers, in the sense that we want to do what makes him happy, we want to have a relationship with God. It's not the fear of, oh my word, I'm going to die. It's the fact that Proverbs 2 says that if you keep his commands, that is the wisdom and the fear of God. Okay? If we're gonna celebrate something, my heart is I'm gonna look at what Leviticus 23 says, and I'm gonna celebrate it according to how he wants me to celebrate it. And then I have to look, okay, how did Yeshua celebrate this? Remember, he was left there when he was a kid. He celebrated Passover, right? When he was like 12 or something like that. His parents came up in the beginning of Luke. You see the story happening. They go up for the Passover Seder. And then they forgot him there. How? I don't understand. But they forgot him there. And where was he? He was in the temple, going about his dad's business. He celebrated Passover, and we can clearly see that that Last Supper was a Passover Seder. The disciples say, where are we going to set up a Seder? He celebrated it and he said, do this in remembrance of me. Not only the new covenant that he installed at that point, but he said, this Passover Seder from now on, because what was the whole point of Passover for the Israelites at that time, the original Passover? Free me from my bondage, Abba, please. They cried out to him. He went down, bam, tapped him in the side, and he said, get out, run. I'm going to do some weird stuff. Your shackles are going to fall off, but you're going to run. And I'm going to make this thing happen. And you're going to see miraculous signs and wonders. And we're going to do this together, but you need to walk with me. Yeshua, on the other hand, what is his point? What does his name say? What is his namesake? Salvation. He redeems us from our sins so that we can get salvation through him. And that's what we need to remember at this time. Number one, where does our salvation come from? Number two, what does God want me to do with my life? And number three, there's a weird instruction in Passover that says, get rid of the chametz in your house, the leavening agents. Any yeast, get rid of that yeast in your house. In your house and in your house. That's the point. Introspect. How can I have a better relationship with Abba? How can I stop doing the things that I shouldn't be doing? Paul, he battled with this, like we all do.
Yeah.
I want to do what I need to do. I want to do what's right, but I find myself doing what I shouldn't be doing. Oh, what a wretched person I am. Don't we all have that battle?
Yes.
Very much so. We're not alone. Okay? If one of the greatest disciples had that battle, guaranteed you're going to have that battle. But the point is that at every Passover, God willing, less and less yeast needs to come out of us. Yeast is that stuff that is sinful, that is prideful, the stuff that puffs you up, stuff that is gangrenous in your life. You know how they make yeast in the biblical times? Take some yeast of fresh dough, pluck some off, leave it somewhere nice and warm, let it grow, green stuff for a few days. Take it, it stinks, it's green, it's yucky. Put it in fresh dough. Your sin is that yucky green stuff. That's why he says get rid of it. So remember, God speaks in pictures. Take that green stuff and throw it out the window, get rid of it. I don't want it in your house. You need to ask yourself now at this time, it's very important at this time that you look inside each and every one of you. You look inside yourself. Even me, I have to do this daily. What am I doing that I shouldn't be doing? What must I stop? What is that yeast? What is that green stuff that shouldn't be in me? Yeah?
I can just share a bit of testimony this Passover. It's been crazy. You get so fixed on sorting out house.
Yeah.
Because God this year said, so that's, it's not just about cleaning out your house, it's about cleaning out your heart. And I could see there's a lot of things that you just let slip. You can be doing your best trying to do the right thing, but stuff slips. And what was actually very sad is that we're getting so busy with our lives. We're not, with everyone eating differently even and different times and everything, being busy with homework and whatever else. Our schedules were just all over the place. We were not synchronized. And what was so special is that now that we've sorted out the house for Passover, now you have to quarantine the crumbs for your bread and everything. So everyone's actually sitting at the table and eating together. And I was like, thank you, Abba, because just by the obedience of cleaning out the house, it kind of restored what was lost. It's just happened over the last, I think, 3 months.
Yeah.
It's just
It gets a bit pear-shaped sometimes, right? And then God brings you back in alignment.
Well, what I can see with there's been an improvement is that we're actually starting to synchronize as a family. And I really felt that it was special that we could get around the table and do. So yeah, it was kind of like, guys, we've gone crazy cleaning and vacuuming and sorting out stuff, moldy sandwiches, after school bags and everything. And let's just keep the crumbs to the kitchen table. Let's not eat in our rooms and away from one another. And for me, that was really special. So, it's funny how God just knows what you need, and every year it's different. But for us this year, we needed to just come together a little bit. It was really special.
For me, it's, you know, like I said, it's always been, okay, well, I celebrated Easter because my parents celebrated Easter. And that's what I did because I had good memories. I can go find Easter eggs. I can go have a good time. I can eat as many Easter eggs as I want or bunnies as I want. But you know, the thing is, and I miss those things. They were really nice. I like those bloody bunnies.
The best chocolate.
It's like they keep the best for their time, right? But it's,
The lunch.
yeah, but I suppose the point then is, okay, you know what, if I'm doing that, I'm inadvertently doing it in remembrance of another God, even though that's not on my mind,
Yeah.
even though that was never on my mind. I don't know about this stuff, okay? But it's a symbol related to a different deity, to a false deity. And if I truly want to spend that time with God, I'm going to, you know, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord how He wants us to serve Him. And it's hard sometimes because you have kids that are like, why can't we do Christmas? Why can't we do Easter? And it's difficult to explain it to them. But if you replace it with something that God has ordained, that God has said, you know what, just do this. I promise you, the Passover Seder has got so much stuff in it, and there's a lot of fun for the kids as well. Okay? And it takes time to get to that point where, you know what, Easter's not a thing anymore, Christmas is not a thing anymore. But before you know it, it's a thing in your distant memory, and you look forward to Shabbat, and you look forward to Passover, and you look forward to Shavuot and Sukkot and Yom Kippur. Not really Yom Kippur that much because you have to fast, but it's a good day nonetheless. You look forward to Sukkot. And this is where you get to spend time with Abba. And every Friday night, Shabbat, when Tem came to me and said, no more Christmas, I'm like, evil woman. Are you mad? Are you smoking your socks? And I'm like, that's the only family time we have. And it was the only family time we had. And now every Shabbat, it's family time. And I get to sit and I get to bless my kids, even though sometimes I might want to strangle them. But I clear that out of my mind. And at that point, it's me and Abba and my family, and we're sitting together and we're having a meal with Abba. Remember that peace offering? Shalomim. Your table is your altar in your house. Enjoy that meal with Abba and your family. And Passover is just one of those times where we can actually do that with God as well. The Passover lamb, Yeshua, was our Shalomim offering. We can partake of Him, and Abba obviously partook of Him.
Can I just add one thing? I'm going to be really honest about this because I think it's something that God has helped heal me through getting ready for Passover as well.
Yeah.
I was very upset and hurt about, because like you say, the only memories you have for family memories is around these times.
Yeah.
Nick, this
So be
Romans 12:2.
very honest.
Sorry.
Be really honest with you, I was actually quite hurt still.
Yeah.
Maybe but I've made peace, and he took what I thought was like evil, and he taught me a lesson with it. And I mean, we had to go to the old age home today, and we handed out Easter eggs. It sounds very like, oh my goodness, that is so controversial. But he helped me to find peace, because when I would see the Easter eggs coming out in February, I'd be already like festering inside, because of this. It's inherited. It's not anyone's intentions. It's not tell you the truth, but you just don't know what to do because you just feel a little lost. So yeah, it was just amazing because through it, I thought we're gonna love people through this, and it's okay. We all are getting there, and the fellowship that we had today. For me, I had peace of mind that it wasn't actually on the actual celebration of Easter. We didn't choose what we were going to be handing out.
Yeah, the company just gave it.
Yeah, but we just worked with it. I just said to the Lord this morning, I said, Lord, what we done today? And it was just so special to have bonded with those people today.
Johnny. So, Numbers 12 too.
The big thing you said, summed up in Romans 12 too.
Romans 12.
Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove that is the good and acceptable and perfect will of God.
Yeah. Because suppose, I'm not, yeah. The fact that people are handing out Easter eggs and all of that doesn't make them bad. They don't know where it comes from. But there comes a point in your life where you have to ask yourself that question. What is this? Why am I doing it this way? Biblical.
But most people don't. They're just sheep. They just.
We all were, right?
They just do
Yeah.
it.
You need to be sensitive.
Yeah.
The thing is, not all of us are like that. Remember what I said to you now the other day? That my whole life through, I've been seeking God. People are worried about calling, whatever. As far as I'm concerned, you put here on earth to seek Him. And in your travel of trying to seek Him, you want to study more and learn more. That is what has attracted me to why I come here. It's because I get answers to questions that the watered down Christian faith that they preach in the church can't answer me.
Yeah.
I go to pastors and I ask them questions and they can't answer me. They look at me and then I come here and then the questions, I get answers to the questions that I had. But not all of us are like that. That's a sad thing.
I know.
But the thing is, not all of us are like that. A lot of people, they are content
With what they
with
do.
what they have.
Yeah.
Because it's inbred in their culture.
Majority
their
are.
creed.
Yes.
You understand? So we need to just always be sensitive. I've made a change in my family. And it's like I've been disowned. I mean, they
Yes.
tell me I'm sick.
That's what I told Tam. I said she's mad.
Not my immediate family, I mean, but they're not following the Hebrew, they're not going back to their Hebraic roots, which is what I'm doing. I'm going back to my Hebraic roots only because God wants me to, and I'm sort of attracted to it. But they can't understand because they feel that, like for instance, when I go to them, I say to them, I don't mean to be disrespectful, but I'll only eat certain foods. I mean, like, for instance, it's a big thing for us, like tomorrow's Good Friday, right?
Yeah.
So they prepare prawns and stuff like that. So I said to them, I will not be eating that. I don't have raisins in my, I take the raisins out of those hot cross stuff.
Okay.
Yeah. So, look, that's me. I don't know if you do that, but I do that, okay?
Raisins are evil.
Raisins are not evil, but I think they're evil.
Okay, so the thing is, it's like, but the thing is, I need to be, it's sort of like God's grace covers you when they insult you, and they insult you.
Yeah, for sure.
They say you're sick, you've lost the plot, you are killing what Jesus done on the cross. And I'm like, but Jesus didn't, he fulfilled the law, he didn't cancel it. You know, but they don't grasp it.
It was Yeshua warned us of that. He says it's going to happen.
Yeah, so it's just but we need to still be sensitive. I've even got a friend that's struggling with that at the moment.
No, you got to be very sensitive with this.
Yeah, and we have debates like on those voice notes. Yes, that I'm spending money, eh? Because the thing is, we have these massive debates. Because the thing is, he's eaten into. There's a guy that did a lot of damage with the grace gospel. I don't know if you know. His name is Joseph Prince. He's done a lot of damage. That guy. He's basically, because of his
Just
poor
from-
knowledge and because of his poor background in the things of God, he has basically walked the grace methodology or the grace gift that we got from God. Yeah, he's poisoned it. So the thing is, they feel that, you know, because Jesus Christ has died on the cross with me, I can live a selfish life and make Jesus this much in my big life, whereas it's supposed to be Jesus must be this much. And your life is supposed to be this much. It's the opposite. So they continue sinning. They continue drinking. They continue. I see this drinking is a sin. Sorry. That's my walk with
If you
God.
abuse it.
Yeah. No. For me, I think we should not take that by fault. Because the thing is, as a colored person, I'm not ashamed to be a mixed breed. Okay? Right? So with us, we have this thingy that we are a very competitive type of person. Okay? So that when we drink, myself included, when I buy a bottle, it is my intention to finish that bottle.
Yeah, but not everyone's like that, you see.
Yeah.
So
But the thing is, like, I'm speaking from my
Yeah.
perspective, so that's why I don't drink at all. Okay, because the thing is, that's speaking
As well.
You
Yeah.
understand?
No, I'm with you. Look, we got to be super sensitive to this, especially with people that hear it for the first time. I had to hear it for the first time as well, and it's the people have to be ready to hear that as well. You can't just go there and shake foundations and expect people to just all of a sudden say, okay, take that foundation away, let's put a new one. It's a process, it's steps. It's steps of truth, it's steps of walking with God and trying to understand, okay, you know what, and there's a lovely saying, test everything. Test everything that you do in your life. Is what I'm doing in this instance right or biblical? Is there anywhere where it's grey? Is there certain things that I'm doing, is it wrong?
There is truth in it. It's
Definitely.
just extra stuff. So I think you just got to work through it, and then every year in line, God reveals stuff to you
Yeah.
as well. So it's a process, right?
What particular example do you have of that?
An example of how every year we have it.
Where you take a little bit of what you learned as tradition and you mix some biblical truth in it? Right? Remember, the golden calf wasn't idolatry in the sense that we understand it. Okay, we say idolatry is worshipping stone statue, and that's it, right? But when they made that golden calf, they said, "Behold, this is the Lord who brought you out in the land of Egypt." Even though it was a symbol of an Egyptian deity, the slave goddess, that was supposed to be their identity. That's who you pray to because that's who you are, nothing but slaves. But they were worshipping the Lord using a pagan thing. Now again, part of that process is sitting down thinking, do I want to link what God has told us to do with anything that's not of Him? You get what I'm saying? So you come down to this point of saying, all right, well, I'm gonna do it my way, not your way. And when we look at Leviticus 23 and those places, it's very clear on the instructions on how He wants us to do it. And when you look at these days, we need to understand it's not about us and how we want to do it. It's about us reflecting Him and how He wants us to do it. So when we come and we sit at His table, He's decked it. Are we getting an accurate reflection of who He is through what He's commanded us to do? Or are we giving more of self? Or a mingleness of every other thing that we picked up along the way to kind of bring that in? We need to understand people's hearts in our walk generally want to please God. And they want to be pleasing to Him. We just have to shift the perception slightly and show them, say, listen, guys, let's equate it to something personal, family days, right? So you have kids, your kids come up to you. And what does daddy like on his birthday? He likes foot rubs, he likes coffee in bed, he wants biltong. and you have a setting of things that you like, okay? On mommy's day. You come in, the kids come in and go, I know it's your day, but you're going to take me to Rejump, and then afterwards you're going to take me for my favorite meal, and then Dad, you are going to have the most awesome time watching Letting Me Go Out with my friend. How loved do you feel? Because you've made that day all about yourself. You've not made that day about God at all. It's how you want to portray Him, how you want to do it. And one of the most eye-opening things for me was going down to Norwood. I took a bunch of guys, okay? And they made in Norwood Pick and Pay, there's this whole massive aisle that says kosher for Passover. Now I understand Jews take it to the umpteenth level. There's some interesting traditions that they've developed that you have to sift through as well. When we walked in, I said to the guys, listen, this is how you shop it. If you're looking for unleavened bread, might say, if you're looking for horseradish, if you're looking for this, get this stuff here. All of our things are here and we can go, right? What was at the end of our aisle? Mm-hmm. Close.
Close enough. That's the bonus.
Podcast plans. So, the biblical narrative from a Jewish perspective is get rid of all the leaven out of your house. The Christian narrative at this time is make hot cross buns. Big, puffy things that are fully yeast. It's actually contrary to what God told us to do, right? this is what struck me the most. If we're reflecting a Jewish God, this Jewish Messiah who followed Torah perfectly, and we say, guys, you can trust him, he's the Messiah. What was fun? Matzah. Good God doesn't exist. He's nullifying Torah. God told me in Deuteronomy 13 that even if he performs miracles, miracle after miracle, if he contradicts God's word, I'm not to follow. Our reflection of this Torah observant rabbi who was the Mashiach, to them is a pagan.
Yeah.
Purely because we've reflected him incorrectly. So, as much as you've got to be sensitive to the people who don't understand this stuff, also got to be sensitive to the accurate reflection of bringing people to salvation. Scripture says we're going to bring the Jews to Genesis. Are you going to do that with a hot cross bun in your hand? They're going to look at you and go, "Buti, you don't even know your own Bible from left to right. How am I going to bring them in?" You know what confuses a Jew? When you celebrate his feast happily and he doesn't want to. It's the amazing thing when I sat down with Jewish guys and they look at me and they see tzitzit and things like that, and then they go, "What do you know about those things?" It's commanded in Torah. I eat kosher, I celebrate the feast. What do you want to know? Why? Why do you want to do these things? You don't have to. But I want to. If God sets apart a day in his time and he says, "Sit at my table and celebrate with me," why would I want to be there? Why wouldn't I want to be there with him? Why wouldn't I want to celebrate with him? Why wouldn't I want to bring glory to him because of all the stuff that he's shown us? See, they've gotten to this point, it's something we do because we're Jewish. 40% atheist Jews celebrate, well, let me rephrase. In Israel, you have an atheist rate of between, fluctuates, but about 40% of Israel is atheist.
Sure, it's a lot.
You know how many people celebrate Passover? 90%.
So what did they do with the atheists?
It's because you're Jewish.
So
Shut
it's
up,
become
man.
a culture, it's not become a
Exactly.
relationship.
Yeah, if you come in, you're Jewish, shut up and eat your matzah. Done. But if you can come in with the right thought and you say, "But God showed me, this is something that brings him glory. This is something that brings him joy. This is something when we get to sit at God's table and celebrate with him, his table, his way, not mine." They look at you and then they get confused. Why do you sound like you have a better relationship with God than I do? Let me tell you about Messiah.
Revelation about the bunnies and the eggs, Leviticus, unclean food, the hares and the rabbits.
It's
So we can't eat them.
Oh,
How can you see?
Chocolate
What
bun.
is the problem? Also, but you can't eat them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the eggs are a little bit more sinister.
But you can eat hot dogs but any time before because they start baking them in January already.
I know.
They put the eggs on the shelf.
Yeah, but those are-
Have you
it's
seen
also
the new
symbolic
photo
of,
breathalyzers though? It's hilarious.
Hmm?
That you eat
Hot cross bun.
hot cross bun and they do a breathalyzer.
It's like 0.2.
Is it?
Yeah.
Well, they used to
0.2.
Is it the it's ethanol, man? Is it?
Yeah.
Stuff's evil. Don't eat hot cross buns.
Yeah,
Got a jab.
I tried telling my wife that I said to my wife, no e-state, no nothing, and then here she's busy packing in hot cross buns. And I'm like, hey,
Some people have linked those hot cross buns to the cakes that they offered up to Nimrod's wife. I forget her name, what was her name?
But I know that those dates cake, those were actually
Proof of that, I don't know.
cakes that
Yeah.
wasn't the same.
But the thing is,
There's a
again, like
contradiction.
what Vince has said, you know, if we're gonna do it, let's do it according to how God wants us to spend time with him, according to how we should do it at the end of the day. And you're gonna get kickback. You're going to. Tam got a lot of
because the
kickback
thing
from
is,
me.
like, even for my wife's not interested. She's not interested. And so what is happening basically is that she's living a separate way to what I'm living. You understand? So it's basically like I'm Muslim and she's Christian. And then I met my sister, and that's why I wanted to, that's why I phoned you. I
Okay.
met my sister. My sister's a staunch Muslim, like as an Orthodox Muslim. And then I explained to her the way that I'm following now.
Yeah.
She said to me that
Oh, you're
I'm
Muslim.
become Muslim. It's easier because you can't convert to Judaism because she didn't understand me. I said, I'm not converting to Judaism. I'm just going back to the original,
The roots of the first
the
believers.
great roots, yeah. The first believer, the way. She just couldn't grasp it, but it's cool. I managed to resolve it.
Such an interesting journey.
Okay, guys.
And you know what's the tough thing for me is I've got a father that he couldn't find, he was looking for God everywhere. He used to read this crap of Deepak Chopra. And
Yeah.
I used to see those books. And my dad used to tell me about dark matter and this matter and that we are gods. And, you know, he's slowly starting to, you know, but the thing is he sat there and here I am representing Jesus Christ and here's my sister representing Allah.
Mm.
And my sister owns a village. She's a billionaire. She comes to South Africa twice a year. She's going on holiday to Egypt. And your son here is like sort of just managing to break even
And wants to go to Israel.
and badly wants to go to Israel, right? And I've sort of felt my flesh took a whack in there because the thing is, I again went into a state of depression because I felt that how am I going to convince my sister that I'm in the right way? If she's living such a fantastic life and I'm just making ends meet.
Yeah, well, we've discussed, right? So how do you know when the spirit is in you? How do you know when someone has the spirit in them?
I don't know.
You see,
Fruit of the Spirit.
right? You see the fruits, right?
Those
So
fruits are beautiful from a materialistic perspective.
materialistic. Yeah.
Although she's got a lot of anger for my father, intense anger for my dad. And she actually accused my dad of things that I don't know my dad ever doing. And I confronted her about it and I told her she better repent and forgive my father.
Let's discuss this
Mm.
just now.
For sure.
But okay, guys. Again, remember, you're going to be teaching when I'm back. See, he's got a lesson for 5 minutes. Are you going to give us a lesson?
Sure.
So Richard does it.
Only 5 minutes.
Only 5
You'll be
minutes.
difficult.
That's all I want.
My deduction.
Alwyn said she's giving us a lesson. Woo!
Mm.
That's fine. As long as you put some biblical scripture up in that thing, that's fine.
I like
Okay, guys, remember, come get some DVDs here if you want. Just write down the DVD, write down which one you're taking. Joe,
You can just recommend
I'll
one that's
show
right
you.
for me, man.
I'll show you.
Because then I'll somehow even play it on Sunday because I've got guests coming over to my place.
Perfect. I'll give you
So,
2.
so eggs are out.
No,
This is
eggs are out, bro.
The chocolate, but.
Chocolate, eggs. Okay, yeah, eggs.
So
are
just
out.
that out.
I'm not going to get into that now. But yes.
Eggs are made of pork.
All right, everyone. Let me bless you.
Must we pull the kids back?
Yeah, bring those kiddies.
That
Maybe
bit-
just put the kids.
Yeah, you cannot eat eggs. But it's to do with fertility and the Ishtar thing, it's all fertility and all this.
I've been getting these stories and I've been eating.
I've been researching on it for a while. And the Easter bunny comes from the Germans, Osterhaus. They started creating this bunny that lay eggs. Bunnies don't lay eggs. And it's 1700 came from Germany. So it's spreading out.
Good to see you, but you know the parts.
You know, he doesn't know the English.
Gotta tell him the English. This is right for the kids.
Okay.
Come, guys. It's blessing.
Oh, give him the video bank vision for you.
Yeah. Come. Uncle Mark's gonna do the blessing first. Where's Johnny? Johnny, go on.
I want to be.
Okay, guys. Thanks. All right, I'm just gonna do the blessing first. Let's just bow.
יברכך יהובה וישמרך. יאר יהובה פניו אליך ויחונך. יישא יהובה פניו אליך וישים לך שלום. בשם ישוע המשיח.
Amen.
Bye bye.
Okay, kids, help Keith with the crayons and with